Now, for more on this topic, we're joined by Gary Cohen, Associate Dean of the Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, Rachelle. Pleasure to be here.
Now, what's your take on why China's foreign trade expanded at the fastest pace since the second half of 2011?
Well, Rachelle, global economies have really been on the upswing, and as a result, demand has increased. If we look at the U.S. alone, the U.S. economy has been moving at a pretty fast pace, and therefore we saw in June an 11.3% increase in China exports to the U.S.
So how sustainable is this momentum, though?
Well, I'm not sure about how sustainable it is, quite frankly, for a couple of reasons. One, China has its own challenges internally. They've got quite a bit of debt. There have been tightened monetary policies in place. Additionally, there are geopolitical risks around the world, and we don't know how that's going to impact consumer demand in the U.S. and globally.
So in terms of what it could mean for China's overall economic growth, what's your take?
Well, I think the outlook for China's economic growth is pretty stable for the remainder of 2017 and 2018. But again, there are many forces at play that are external, and we have to see how they play out. A great example of this would be the issue with North Korea. And my prediction is that President Trump will be putting more pressure on President Xi to impose sanctions on North Korea. Of course, this increases tensions and so forth.
Now, China's trade surplus with the United States reached a 20-month high. We know that's been another hot-button issue and regular talking point for Donald Trump. How do you think that's going to play out?
Well, I think it will continue to play out. And I think with the news cycles focused in other places right now, like the Russia investigation, I think the Trump administration will be looking for ways to divert that focus. And I do believe some of that will be on trade. So I think although we saw things settle down after the April summit, I believe we're going to see things heat up.
So when trying to look at the entire economic picture between two countries, how important is it to focus on something like a trade surplus?
Well, it's important, although it does not define how well economy is necessarily doing overall. So, for example, as I mentioned, China has a fantastic surplus right now, the highest in 20 months with the U.S. It topped $25 billion in June. But China does have internal challenges right now as well. And that can impact their economic situation. So we can't just isolate the trade surplus alone.
So what are your thoughts on whether this issue of the trade surplus will really dominate the discussion between China and the U.S. next week at the Comprehensive Economic Dialogue?
Well, I do think it's going to be a major point of discussion. And as I mentioned before, I think there will be quite a bit of deflection, and that will be a focus of the Trump administration. I think there will be a pretty hard-line play on the fact that the surplus has reached a 20-month high, and I see it as a major point of discussion next week.
So what's your outlook for China's foreign trade picture for the second half of the year, if you had to look in your crystal ball?
I think trade for the second half of the year will be stable. I think their trade will hold up. I see it being stable. But when we look beyond that and we look to the second half of 2018, I think it's unpredictable because of all the reasons I mentioned before. Both the internal situation in China with their tightened monetary policies and also the geopolitical risks that will impact consumer demand globally.
Now, something else that could provide a headwind, we have this uncertain outlook for commodity prices, as well as some sentiment about rising trade protectionism. How do you think that might affect China's trade picture?
Well, certainly I believe it will. And speaking from the perspective of the United States, we know that candidate Trump talked about protectionism quite a bit, and in fact singled out China. He specifically singled out steel imports and how much that was hurting U.S. steel companies. Interesting side note to that is China is only the 6th largest exporter of steel to the United States. The rhetoric did tone down once he was elected, And of course, after April and the summit, it really did settle down. But I believe that with the reports that just came out and the surplus that hit a high over the last 20 months, I think we're going to see the Trump administration heat things up a bit in this discussion of protectionism.
We'll certainly have to wait and see. Thank you so much for your insights. Gary Cohen, Associate Dean at the Robert H. Smith School of Business at the University of Maryland.
Thank you, Rachelle.